Hi, Boker Tov.
Boker Tov, Shabbat Shalom,
Shabbat
Simchat
Shalom.
Chanukah, Chodesh Tov,
Chodesh Tov. Like you said in your
and,
email, too much
and
celebration.
y'all have a nice day too.
Oh, look at that Torah Ark. Interesting. Do you see that in Raisel's? Ah, that was such a nice image.
That Torah arc was Zalman's, and
Oh,
Zalman. It was before my time, but he found that piece of furniture on the street, and the story is that he converted it with the help of his Talmidim to an ark
wow.
again,
Wow.
and
Cool.
it was up at El Chaim, and that's why I used to work at El Chaim. So
Oh, it's great. And that's Eilat Chaim right there.
right,
I remember that little corner. Oh my God.
right.
Beautiful.
Did you come to El Chaim?
I have, yes, yes, several times. Not as Eilat Chaim. I've done retreats there with other organizations.
Yeah, are you talking about Isabella Friedman or the one in
No,
Anaheim?
I'm talking about Eilat Chaim.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Yeah,
So do you remember that arc?
I do. I remember. Yeah, I think I do, and I remember that corner too.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly. So it
yeah.
means a lot to me, so I just decided to put it up.
Beautiful, beautiful. Where's the Ark now?
The arc is at Isabella Friedman, I believe,
Oh,
but I don't know if it's in public or in storage. I don't know.
we're being
I
used.
haven't
Uh-huh.
been there in a
Cool.
really long time, but it
Got it.
means a lot to me.
Yeah, yeah. I can see why.
Yeah.
Hi, Daniel. How are you doing? Shabbat shalom. Let's see, Jay. Hi, Alana. Shabbat shalom. Chanukah sameach. Oh, look, Jenna also remembers the Ark. If you see in the chat.
What did she say? Where is
So
her?
she says, I remember the Ark and I remember the corner.
Maybe I should leave it up so other people would see it.
Well, yeah, I mean, we want to see your face, but you can go back and forth if you want. That's fine.
I'll leave it and then I'll come back up.
Okay, sure. Look at that nice Sarah's little image there. That's beautiful. All right. Well, it's 8:45. I think we'll give it 1 minute. Hi, Amy from Florida. Jay. Alana was here. Now she's see your photo. Amy, good to see you. What a beautiful spot you're in. You're muted if you're talking
Yeah,
to us.
these clover were brought over from Ireland by ship 60 years ago and landed in my neighbor's yard. And he gave me some, and I've been propagating them for 10 years.
Amazing. It looks so lush. Beautiful.
Well, I'm really just like it's my backdrop. I'm photographing down into a pot of plants, but
Oh,
that.
oh, oh, I got it. I thought you were actually outdoors. Got it.
No, I'm not.
No.
I just wanted to tell you this week, Reb Zalman's great grandson had his bris in Sfat.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Wow, what a
Yeah.
simcha. What a simcha.
I can't even imagine how many great grandchildren he has.
Oh my God. Well, I don't know how many children did he have?
I think in the neighborhood of 10.
Wow. Got
Yeah,
it.
so lots of great grandchildren.
He was fruitful and
Depends on by which wife.
got it.
Ilana.
His firstborn lives in Toronto, and he used to come up here every Pesach and be in our kahila. It was wonderful.
Mhm.
All right, I saw Harley for a minute. Good morning. Paul. Alana has been in and out. Sherry, I see Sherry. I haven't seen you in so long. All right, I think we're gonna it's hi Beth, good morning. Shabbat Shalom. I think we're gonna get going. Let's drop the source sheet again in the chat.
Oh, just to say, Reb Zalman's child, it was Ilana, and the child was Shalvi, if people know her. That was her grandson, Shalvi's. In other words, it went from Reb Zalman and Ilana to Shalvi, and then that's the great grandson line. So, sorry.
Good to know.
Can we study in his honor today?
Sure. Sure. Vod and Zecher Reb Zalman. Sure. Okay, I think we're gonna start. Hi everybody. Good morning. Shabbat Shalom. Chanukah Sameach. Chodesh Tov. There's a lot to say. Barbara, good to see you. Wow. Oh, Alina. Oh my God. Great to see faces I haven't seen in a little while. Bob, hi. Shabbat Shalom. Okay, Anna, yes, I didn't have to finish the sentence. Daniel, do you want to take it away with the bracha this morning?
Sure. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam asher kedeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen, amen. So blessed are you who gives us this space of revelation and sacred wisdom and has given us the ability to interpret. So here we are with each other. And today's session is really, I mean, at least in large part, hi Roberta, is about interpretation. So let's go. Let me share my screen. Okay, so it's, as we said, Shabbat, Hanukkah, and Rosh Chodesh. And today we're going to look a little bit at the Parsha and a little bit at Hanukkah itself. And you know, if you recall from the beginning of Joseph's story, he's quite self-centered, right? He's got these dreams. He lords it over his brothers. He tells tales about them. And he seems a little oblivious to the impact that he's having on them, right? The negative impact that he's having on his family. And he certainly suffers the consequences. And then he goes to Egypt and he becomes, you know, the grand viceroy, I don't really know what the word is, in Potiphar's house. And Potiphar's wife comes onto him and he resists her, her attempts. And he lands, and she accuses him, and he lands up in jail. So first in the pit, and then in the jail, which is also referred to as the pit, which we'll see. And then he interprets dreams in the jail of the butler and the cupbearer. And then Pharaoh has these nightmares, and he hears, and no one can interpret his dreams. And he hears there's a fabulous dream interpreter in jail, a Hebrew, and he lifts him up out of jail. And that's basically where we are in our story. So first I want to point to a slightly earlier moment when he's in jail, when Joseph's in jail, and the butler and the cupbearer, it's the baker and the cupbearer? Sorry, did I get that wrong? Okay, it's the baker and the cupbearer. Thank you. They say to Joseph, we had dreams and there's no one to interpret them. So I want to sort of trace the arc of Joseph's sort of shifting consciousness. So, Vayomru Elav in chapter 40, verse 8, Chalom chalamnu upoter enoto. We had dreams and there's no one to interpret them. Vayomer alehem Yosef. And Joseph says to them, Halo le'elohim pitronim. Don't interpretations come from God? Right? Sipru na'ali, tell me your dreams. So already we see, like, he doesn't put himself forward as this brilliant dream interpreter. Okay, Asher Chaim is like he's having conniptions. Do you want to say briefly what you have to say?
It's the old joke, or based on the old joke. The difference between God and Joseph is that God doesn't think that he's Joseph. Joseph says, only God can interpret your dreams. Tell them to me. And in the text, he never asks God, what does this mean? God never tells him what it means. It's Joseph playing God.
All right, so we already have dueling interpretations, me and Asher Chaim. But let me lay out my interpretation and then we can duel some more. Okay, so my question for this session is, what does it mean to live with a dual consciousness of a secular life and a God-infused life? And where do those intersect? Do they always intersect? Do they sometimes intersect? Do they never intersect? And what does that look like? And we're going to dive into what happens with Joseph and Pharaoh. And we're going to start with Pharaoh's dreams. Okay, so these are the dreams. These are his nightmares. He can't find anyone in his, empire to interpret them. And he hears, oh, there's this great, dream interpreter, and he's in jail. So he sends for him. Vayishlach Paro vayikra et Yosef vayiritzuhu min habor. So Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was rushed from the dungeon. But note that it's called bor, like the original pit, although other times it's referred to as a prison, as a Beit Sohar. Vayigalach vayichalef simlotav vayavo el Paro. He had his hair cut and changed his clothes, and he appeared before Pharaoh. And the reason I bolded changed his clothes, vayichalef simlotav, is that Joseph, and also much of Genesis, clothes play a crucial role and a pivotal role in Joseph's life. The tunic of ornamented colors, or the ornamented tunic, or the coat of many colors, is stripped from him. First, he has it, and that's a cause of jealousy, or it's given to him by his father, a cause of jealousy. Then it's stripped from him. And then when Potiphar's wife comes onto him, she rips some of his clothes, and now he's lifted up from jail and, changed clothes again. Vayomer Paro el Yosef, Chalom chalamti upoter enoto, vani shamati alecha, lemor tishma chalom liftoroto. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I have had a dream, but no one can interpret it. Now I have heard it said of you that for you to hear a dream is to tell its meaning. What does Joseph say? Vayan Yosef et Paro lemor, Bil adai Elohim ya'aneh et shlom Paro. So Joseph responds to Pharaoh and says, not me. So that, to me, Asher Chaim, it really is a pivotal moment in the text. It's not me. It's not about me. God will respond to Pharaoh's welfare. V'yidaber Paro el Yosef b'chalomi. I'm sorry. V'yidaber Paro el Yosef. And Pharaoh says to Joseph, "B'chalomi hineni omed al svat hayor." In my dream, here I am standing on the banks of the river, or the banks of the Nile, I guess. V'hinei min hayor olot sheva parot briot, and from the river emerged 7 healthy cows, briot basar, or healthy, fleshy cows. V'yifot toar, beautiful, v'tir ena ba'achu. And they graze in the reed grass. V'hinei sheva parot acherot olot acharehen dalot v'raot to'ar ma'od v'rakot basar. And there followed them 7 other cows, scrawny, ill-formed, and emaciated. V'lo ra'iti kahena b'chol eretz Mitzrayim La Roa, and never had I seen their like for ugliness on all the land of Egypt. So this is interesting because this little bit, I've never seen how, their likes for ugliness is not in the original dream account, but it is in Pharaoh's retelling of the dream. V'tochalna haparot harakot v'haraot, and the 7 lean and ugly cows ate up at sheva haparot harishonot habriot, the original 7 healthy cows. Vatavona el, and this is also an addition from the original account of the dreams. Vatavona el kerbena velono daki ba'u el kerbena umar ehem. Ra kasher betchila v'ikatz. But when they had consumed them, one could not tell that they had consumed them, for they looked just as bad as before. Right? So they ate and ate and ate these beautiful, healthy, fleshy cows, but they're still, scrawny and, unhealthy looking. Ve'erat achalomi v'hinei sheva shibolim olot bakena echad leot v'tovot. In my other dream, so his second dream, I saw 7 ears of grain, full and healthy, growing on a single stalk. V'hinei sheva shibolim snumot dakot shdufot kadim somchot achareihem. But right behind them spread 7 ears, shriveled, thin, and scorched by the east wind. Vativlena hashibolim hadakot et sheva hashibolim hatovot. And the healthy ears of corn ate, I'm sorry, the unhealthy ears of corn ate the healthy ears of corn. Va'omar el hachartumim ve'ein magid li. And I've told my magicians, but none has explanation for me. Okay, so I want to do a little experiment. Stop my share. I want, oh my God, there's already a lot of discussion in the chat. I want people to quickly tell me or surmise, what are these dreams about? Interpret the dreams. You probably mostly know what Joseph is going to say about the dreams, but what are these dreams about? What's going on here? Before I call on anybody, I'm going to call on people later. Put it in the chat. Sheva, like quick thoughts. What are these dreams about? Interpret. Think and then interpret. How's that? About good stuff disappearing before bad stuff. Yes. Oh, interesting. Pharaoh's abuse of people in power. Alana, how so? Say more. How is that? Say more in the chat.
Yes, I'm thinking about how the dream carries the unconscious. And so I see the healthy swallowing up that there's some kind of, so it starts off with there's some way in which the lean is swallowing up the healthy, but that there's something here about the imbalance between the powerful and the less powerful. I guess that's part of what I'm trying to get at here. And that, Joseph seems to interpret the dream in a way that feeds.
But we're not talking, I don't want to be up to the interpretation yet.
Okay.
Not yet.
Yeah, but yes.
Stick to what do you guys think this dream is about?
Yeah, so the phenomena is that the strong and the weak are not balancing each other out.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so nature is, I'm going and reading in the text. Nature is unpredictable, stubborn, and has mind of its own, from Bob. And Margot says, and she.
We can't hear you,
I was
Diane.
muted, sorry. Dreams are Mikates, Roberta says. Joseph can see further, so he's a powerful strategist. Ooh, maybe revolution. He can see to the end. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about what these dreams mean. So the deprived, ugly, unhealthy representations of reality on this earth consume the healthy. Wait, let me just see what Asher Chaim says. First animals, then grain. Yeah. Oh, I see. That's interesting. And it makes me think of, I'll call on people in a minute. It makes me think of how, like, in certain states of depression, no matter what happens, it all looks bad. It's like that beast that consumes anything good. Or people who feel deprived all the time, scarcity, that no matter what they get, they feel like it doesn't fill the hole, right? And it reminds me also of, I was walking with this, my dog walks. I was walking with this woman the other day, and she was telling me about her family, like a really serious issue in her family, about how her sisters and brothers don't talk to each other, and she's really afraid of passing it down to her kids. And suddenly we saw like these beautiful dogs, and we stopped to look at them. And I said, oh, I didn't mean to interrupt. Like, I was listening to your story. And she said, no, these things can live side by side. So, like, sometimes things are happening in your life that are so bad that they consume everything. And other times the good and the bad can sort of coexist, and don't have to consume and actually destroy each other. So I think, at least in part, in Pharaoh's dreams, it's like death and sickness just consuming everything, so that possibly nothing good will be left in Pharaoh's world. Okay, so Beth and Alina.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
My study of dream interpretation with a couple of Jungians has the idea that we should treat all the elements in the dream as a reflection of the dreamer. And so this is Pharaoh's dream. And so he's dreamt of these fat, sassy cows, as well he should have, because he's the ruler of a country. And then he's also dreamt of these ugly, scrawny cows, which reflect something about him. There's something about him that's ugly and scrawny. And then the ugly, scrawny ones eat the fat ones. And I think that says something about Pharaoh's insatiable greed, that he wants and he wants and he wants, and he doesn't have enough, and he's just going to stay scrawny. And then they don't look changed at all, which again speaks to this insatiability on Pharaoh's part.
Nice. Okay, just back to Alana's comment for a minute. So Alana was trying to say, if this were Trump, for example, we can view the Pharaoh as the poison power consuming the well-beings of others. Yeah, that makes sense. Those in power occupy in a sick place in the dream. Yeah, that's powerful. Neil says, Egypt, the narrow place where the Sabbath is not observed. So yeah, I like this ethical sort of justice dimension. 7 days with no rest, a culture which must fall. Okay, now I'm going to go to Alina. Yeah. Alina, we can't hear you.
I know. You can hear me now?
Yeah.
I don't know. I went to what's happening in our country right now and how the underdogs are sort of raising up and consuming the attention certainly right now. And I was thinking how to take the model of how Joseph will later interpret the dream in terms of saving up, how we can deal with when these underdog people come trying to take over the country. You know, it just came to my mind in terms of what's going on in our country right now.
How might we protect ourselves from
Yeah.
a possible coming regime?
Well, not even that, but just like the January 6th people and how that isn't going away, and that the people who we've typically seen as underdogs and people that we weren't necessarily seeing in power are suddenly getting a lot of power, and how to use this model to think about how to deal with that.
Yeah, interesting. So what are the resources we can bring to that
Yeah,
dynamic?
yeah.
Thank you. I'm also interested. Sarah says, similar to the insatiable hungry ghost images in Buddhism, which I'm not aware of. That sounds really interesting. Okay, Eliu.
Hello, Shabbat Shalom. Nice to see you. Let's think about it. Of course, it's easy. It's very easy to say the obvious, because we know the story, we know the interpretation, the obvious. Can I respond like a Jew with another answer? What could be a different way of interpret this dream? There are another different ones. Besides that, we always know about the interpretation. Understand?
I didn't totally get it, Eliu. Try one more time.
Because, of course, to us, it's very obvious, 7 years of poor, rich. This we know very well. We know the history, we know the interpretation. Let's think in another interpretation. Can we think a different one, a more disruptive one, a more different? I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I am asking.
I would love to. Do you have any ideas?
I don't know. To me, it's very interesting. One thing, the beginning of the parasha. In some way, God give the dream, and God give the interpretation. It's very funny about it, I think. If you think about God,
Yosef describes the dreams as from God, and then the interpretation is also from God. All right, so let's hold these sort of categories of abundance and deprivation and consuming in mind, and see where they go as we continue on. I'm going to I know Nehemiah. What?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Nehemiah, I think I'm going to get you at the end, correct? Okay, I'm sharing my screen. Okay, so let's see what Joseph has to say. Asher Chaim, do you feel like reading? Should I make it bigger? Source 4.
Vayomer Yosef el Paro. Halom Paro ehad hu. Yosef said to Paro, Pharaoh's dream is one. Et asher ha'elohim oseh higid leFaro. What the God is about to do, he has told to Paro. Sheva parot tovot sheva shanim heina. The 7 good cows are 7 years. V'sheva hashibalim hatovot sheva shanim henna. The 7 good ears of grain are 7 years. Halom ehadhu. It is one dream. V'sheva haparot harakot v'haraot aulot aharehen. And the 7 skinny cows, bad cows that are coming up after them, sheva shanim hena. They are 7 years. V'sheva hashibalim harekot shedufot hakadim yiyu sheva shnei ra'av. And the 7 empty, wind-blasted ears of grain will be 7 years of famine. Hu hadavar asher debarti al Paro asher ha'elohim oseh her'a et Paro. This is what I've been telling you, Pharaoh. What the God is about to do has been shown to Paro. Hinne sheva shanim ba'ot so sava gadol b'chol eres Mitzrayim. 7 years are coming that will be great abundance throughout the land of Mitzrayim. Nakamu sheva shnei ra'ava harehen, but 7 years of famine will come up after them. V'nishkach kol hasava be'eres Mitzrayim. And all of the abundance will be forgotten in the land of Mitzrayim. V'chillah hara'av et haaretz. And the famine will put an end to the land. V'lo yivada' hasava ba'aretz mipnei hara'av hahu acharechen ki chaved hu me'od. And the abundance in the land will not be known in the face of the famine, that famine after it, because it will be very, very onerous. Ve'al hishanot halom el Paro pa'amayim, and as to the duplication of that dream to Paro, ki nachon hadavar me'im ha'elohim umemaher ha'elohim la'asoto, because it is firmly established from the God, and the God is hastening to carry it out.
Great, thank you so much. So there are 2 categories here, right? One of famine and one of abundance or satiety. And after the 7 years of abundance, we will have the years of famine, and that will completely wipe out any memory of the abundance. So we have categories that will nullify one another, or at least the one will nullify the other, right? The famine will nullify the abundance. Okay, so let's see how Joseph continues. So this is really interesting. So not only does he have an interpretation for Pharaoh, but he has a plan, right? And Pharaoh didn't ask for a plan. He only asked for an interpretation. But Joseph adds this. Va'ata yerei Pharaoh ish navon v'chachom v'yishitehu al eretz Mitzrayim. Let Pharaoh find a man of discernment and wisdom and set him over the land of Egypt. Ya'asef Pharaoh vayifked pikidim al haaretz v'chimesh et eretz Mitzrayim b'sheva shnei hisava. And let Pharaoh take steps to appoint overseers of the land and organize the land of Egypt in the 7 years of plenty. V'kapsu et kol ochel hashanim hatovot habaot ha'eleh. And let all the food of these good years that are coming be gathered. V'yitzbaru var tachat yad Paro, ochel be'arim v'shamaru. Let the grain be collected under Pharaoh's authority as food to be stored in the cities. Paya ochel lefikadon la'aretz l'sheva shnei ra'av asher tiyena be'eretz Mitzrayim, and let the food be a reserve for the land of the 7 years of famine, which will come upon the land of Egypt. The lotikaret haaretz bera'av, so that the land may not perish or be cut off in the famine. Vayitav hadavar be'enei Pharaoh be'enei kol avadav. The plan pleased Pharaoh and all his courtiers. Vayoma paro el havadav hanimsa kazeh ish asher ruach Elohim bo. And Pharaoh said to his courtiers, could we find another like him, meaning Joseph, a man in whom is the spirit of God? So this reminds me of, the prevailing sort of wisdom in organizations that if you have a problem, right, you don't just go to your boss and complain about it. You sort of describe the problem and you suggest a solution, where you come with a solution. And that ends up like positioning you much better than if you're the complainer. So Joseph had an interpretation, Joseph had a solution, and perhaps Joseph was strategizing to be appointed. But in any case, Pharaoh, as soon as he gave the plan, Pharaoh says, you the man, right? You the man. Okay, Jay Alana.
That last line that you just read has always fascinated me, and it may cast something on this controversy between our dueling rabbis. Ruach Elohim is a pretty significant phrase. I mean, it occurs in verse 2 of the Tanakh? And as a quality in humans, it's very rare. And in fact, as a quality that's intrinsic in humans, only occurs twice in the whole Tanakh. One of them is Yosef. So
you mean here in Genesis, is that what you're saying?
No, in the whole Tanakh.
Right, but where are the two places?
The other is Betzalel.
I see.
Betzalel is the only other human described as having Ruach Elohim as an intrinsic quality. There are some passing references, and I think in Judges, whatever, as a temporary quality. But there's only two places in the whole Tanakh where Ruach Elohim is a quality. So that seems to be kind of a middle road between your conflict, that there is something special about him that is a manifestation of something greater.
Yeah, I'm not saying that he's not a strategist. He's certainly a strategist.
No. The question is, what is Yosef largely and simply taking on the cloak of God to push his own agenda or aggrandize himself or whatever, or is he in fact imbued with some special qualities that in fact are like a channel to God, as if Moshe later is? So that's the way. So I think the fact that Ruach Elohim bo, which is a really important phrase, it gives us a clue, I think.
Excellent. So basically that supports my position.
Shalom bayit. I'm not going to say any further.
Okay. Lana and Barbara.
Okay, so building upon Beth's mention of Jungian dream interpretation, one of the methods that I was taught by a Jungian teacher was to view, particularly when you have a dream in multiple parts, that the first part of the dream is the situation of the person, the dreamer, what they're conscious of, what they're not conscious of. And then the second part is what the psyche is calling them towards. The second part is the nature of the conflict. Where is the stuckness? And then a third part would be what the psyche is calling forward. And often the nature of the dream has so much that is not conscious. And as a dream interpreter, psychotherapeutically, you're looking for that part in the dream that that carries the unconscious part. So I was just thinking about how, from the perspective of thinking about this as Pharaoh's dream, that he is absent in this dream. There's no person who is doing anything, in any way. He's observing what's happening. Yeah, but he's not intervening, and he's the Pharaoh. He's sort of abdicated his responsibility. Maybe he doesn't care. Maybe that's what his psyche is wanting him to do. So Joseph does something so skillful. On the one hand, he promotes himself, but he also brings in maybe that unconscious part of Pharaoh's dream, or where God or the psyche might want things to go. Joseph says, we need to do something. We need to bring in compassionate agency and save the food and figure out a way to feed people. So he
love it.
That part of Pharaoh that's missing.
He brings them from abdication to agency. That's beautiful, powerful. And it also reminds me of how quick we are to interpret, but we don't often take the next step, like, oh, this my interpretation implicates me in the following way,
Yes.
right? And I feel like especially, now in like the political arena, like both sides so full of like negativity that you can barely sort of carry it, right? But perhaps this is a model for us. Perhaps. I don't know. Barbara.
Okay. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Yes, agree with both Jay and Ilana and Rabbi Diane. And I guess what strikes me so much is, sometimes when somebody does have special abilities, as Jay was talking about, we respond with negativity. It becomes somewhat threatening and on some level, and of course this happens to Joseph over and over again. He just might have been the golden bright-eyed child that was smarter than his brothers, but the way it's handled, it causes a lot of trouble, because and so here we are quick to judge his assertion of godliness, as opposed to God channeling through him, which the the text seems to be saying. But the same thing with Pharaoh, right? We're saying that Pharaoh abdicates his power, but in fact Pharaoh acts like a great leader in that he believes the dream, because he could have
Interesting.
not believed it, because maybe there were a
Interesting.
whole bunch of other people, and he said, no, that's not it, that's not, no. And he goes on then to appoint somebody, turns out to be Joseph, so that he in fact doesn't have this catastrophe in his country that goes on around the area for so many other people. And so both of them, to me, act with clarity and strength, and maybe not so much greed and all those other things. So
That's really interesting what you're saying, Barbara, because I think that we were probably interpreting Pharaoh in terms of what happens later, and looking at like, oh, Pharaoh must be, sort of an oppressive guy.
Isn't that the different Pharaoh later?
No, of course it's a different Pharaoh.
Yeah.
We hear Pharaoh and then we assume abuse of power, but that's not necessarily true. And you're
Pharaoh
all pointing out
leader might
positive things.
Okay. And right.
Yeah,
And
it's
things
really interesting.
all the same.
Cool. All right, Daniel, and then I'm going to move on because I see people are raising their hands again, and I'll come back to you later. Daniel.
Just a quick comment. When Joseph told his dreams to his father and his brothers, he was 17 years old.
Yeah.
And his father almost had a heart attack. Jacob did not really appreciate his son Joseph in terms of his innate capacity to connect with the divine through dreams. He was a chip off the old block. This is Jacob's son, Jacob the visionary, who understood the power of dreams and the presence of the divine in dreams. Jacob's first encounter with the divine is in a dream. In the latter dream, Yud-He-Vav-He introduces the Yud-He-Vav-He self to Jacob. Joseph is a chip off the old block. 13 years later, he's 30 years old, and he's having a kind of psychotherapeutic, emotionally corrective relational experience with Pharaoh, who loves him to death and validates him in such a beautiful, holy way. Like, it's amazing. Who's the therapist in this situation? It looks like Joseph is performing therapy on Pharaoh's dreams.
Yeah.
But Pharaoh's actually giving Jacob an experience of connectedness he's never had.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So interesting, so powerful.
For all of how horrible Pharaoh is, in this role, he's doing.
Well, we don't know that he's horrible here.
Okay.
As Barbara was just telling us.
Yeah. Okay.
We're looking at Pharaoh with new eyes at this moment.
Beautiful.
It's very interesting. I was studying this text with some students this week at AJR, and one of them said something so beautiful, is that Joseph takes us from death to life, right? Like Pharaoh's dreams represent death, right? Death sort of consuming all. And Joseph, by taking abundance into famine brings us back to life, right? And again, by integrating opposites in a particular direction. Okay, I'm going to do a few more texts and I'll come back to the people who have their hands up. Let's see. And great comments. Thank you, everybody. Okay, so I want to do, there's some really nice texts here that we're not going to do, but I want to go to Moshe Weinstein, who I think I met once, if memory's not failing me, who talks about the different, and it's interesting, Daniel, that you just brought up Jacob's dreams, because, the Joseph stories are kind of a novella in Genesis from chapter 37 through the end of the book, which I think is, I forget, 49 or 50. And the preceding stories really have a different qualitative sense to them, like the connection to God between like Abraham and God and Jacob and God and Yitzchak and God, and well, the women are a little different, but still it's like from the patriarchs and the matriarchs to Joseph, the literature has like a different religious quality. And I will look at Moshe Weinstein sort of explicating that quality as compared to the earlier stories in Genesis. But even in the story that you just brought up, Daniel, of Jacob's dream earlier, like, it's an awesome, religiously, filled, it's a spiritual filled experience for Jacob, and the religious meaning is clear. Like there's not as much need for like these riddles and interpretations of the dreams in the Joseph narratives. So can someone read the English of Moshe Weinstein, which is from his commentary on Genesis?
I will, Rabbi Diane.
Great, thank you. Is that Ronnie Scharfman?
Yes, Ronnie.
Thank you.
In contrast to the preceding narratives, the subject matter of the Joseph story bears more of a secular and down-to-earth quality. The active force behind events are described as purely human and ostensibly as occurring without the involvement of God.
Well, let's stop there for a minute, because that's not entirely true. Joseph doesn't have conversations with God, but there are moments like in Potiphar's house and in the prison where it says God, made everything that Joseph did successful. So it's not entirely true.
Nevertheless, the events don't take place for no reason beyond the obvious causal factors. At certain climactic points, the text explains that the events only appear to take place naturally, but that they are actually the result of a divine plan. In a similar way to other places in other biblical texts, a double causation is in evidence here. On one hand, the logical consequences or natural processes. On the other hand, a hidden hand directing events towards the fulfillment of the divine plan.
Yeah, so that's just, an interesting shift in the literature. Let's look at one more piece of this and I'll come back to your comments. Of course, there's so much more to do. So later on in the story, when Joseph is already, a viceroy in Egypt, and the brothers come to him because there's a famine, right, in the land of Canaan. They go down into Egypt and they want grain. And, all these dynamics and kind of shenanigans happen. Like, Joseph is sort of taking a slow and painful revenge on his brothers. So let's just revisit this moment of the narrative. So Vayomar Alehem Yosef, Vayom HaShishi, Zot asu v'chiyu, et Elohim ani yareh. Do this and you shall live, Joseph says to them, for I am a God-fearing man. If you are honest men, let one of you brothers be held in your place of detention while the rest of you go and take home rations for your starving households. So he's bargaining with them and bartering with them and not simply giving them the food that they need. Im keinim atem, achichem, sorry, just figuring out how to read that. Achichem, echad ye'asar bevet mishmarchem, v'atem l'chu haviu shever ra'avon batechem. If you are honest men, let one of you brothers be held in your place of detention, while the rest of you go and take home rations for your starving households. Ve'et achichem hakaton taviu elai, V'ye'amnu divrechem v'lo tamutu v'yasu ken. But you must bring me your youngest brother, that your words may be verified and you may not die. And they did accordingly. So, the fact that he wants the youngest brother and kind of holds him captive is in certain ways a repetition of what happened to him, right? He's structurally setting it up again. So now the brothers have this conversation with one another. Vayamru ish el achiv, aval ashemim anachnu al achinu asher ra'inu. Saratz nafsho v'hitchanano al elenu v'lo sham'anu al ken ba'a elenu hatzara hazot. They said to one another, alas, we're being punished on account of our brother because we looked on at his anguish. You could just imagine what, Joseph was doing when he was thrown into the pit, screaming for them, right? Yet paid no heed as he pleaded with us. Oh my God, what a heartbreaking looking back that we weren't apprised of earlier in the narrative. Right? So now we hear of Joseph's anguish at that moment, and they're not listening to and not responding to the anguish. That is why this distress has come upon us. So they're now linking that moment with this moment as a kind of karmic revenge. So that's really interesting. Le'an Ruven Otam lemor. Halo amarti alechem lemor. Al tachteu vayeled v'lo shematem. V'gam damo hine nidrash. Then Reuben spoke up and said to them, did I not tell you, do no wrong to the boy, but you pay no heed. Now comes the reckoning for his blood. Ooh. V'hem lo yadu kushomea Yosef hi hamelitz beinotam. They did not know that Joseph understood, for there was an interpreter between him and them. So there's this interesting, recurrence of structurally of the story in the way that Joseph's sort of orchestrating things. And it's a moment in which they finally got, what they did to their brother and what they might, what they caused him, the distress they caused him. And it's interesting because in the interpretation of dreams, Joseph seems like a fully, sort of evolved man, at least to me. And now he's really manipulating his brothers left and right, really, and causing them great pain, and really is very interested in vindication. Okay. So I have Eliu and Beth.
Very beautiful what you said. To me, now it's clear. Of course, the text, the Genesis, is not a secular one. It's very different about the Freud interpretation, because Freud would say, the therapeut would say to the patient, what do you think about the dream? Freud never would say, you have to do this. It's very different way of interpretation. Of course, this is it's very different.
You're saying for Freud, there's no practical takeaway. There's just analysis. Right.
But now some positive psychologists say you have to do this. It's not a Freudian way, of course. It's very different.
Along with the interpretation, there's a kind of coaching.
Yes. Freud is not coaching. Freud is
Freud is not a coach.
Yes. I'm a therapist. I'm psychiatrist. So, of course, because this is about the relationship about man and God. The therapist is another thing. I only like to do. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ellie. Really interesting. Okay, I'm going to go to Alana and then Beth. Go ahead. Ilana.
Oh, hi. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Face paint.
Oh, is that what that is? I thought it was Ash Wednesday, but it's
a menorah.
That's great.
Having a Hanukkah celebration. I'm just that's interesting. It comes up for me right now, just like what Joseph is doing in that last thing of, is it manipulative, or in that way that Ben was sort of offering before, like he's working through something, and in that healing way of replaying with a different outcome.
I think that's a much more generous way to look at it. But whatever it is, there's an intense repetition going on for everybody, which I think ultimately is healing, right? They come to recognition, and then he comes to forgiveness. So yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it. That's it. All right, Beth.
I don't look at this Pharaoh or Joseph as benign characters.
Uh-huh.
Pharaoh has a quest for control and power and consumption. And Joseph helps him figure out how to do it. Yeah, the saving of the grain saves the people. But as we will learn later, at what cost? They have to give up everything.
Yeah.
The
So
state
say a little bit more. Say a little bit more. Explain to people exactly what Joseph does later on.
Well, when the lean years come, people are coming to the granaries for food, and they're giving up their possessions. They're giving up their animals. They're giving up their belongings. They're giving up their land. They're ceding any control they ever had of anything to avoid starvation.
Yeah, and in fact, it says that they become avadim. They become servants or slaves to Jay. It's like it's the precursor of the slavery in Exodus. It's fascinating and disturbing. Most rabbis don't really teach us this. They don't want to sort of out Joseph around this. But I appreciate that you did.
Yeah, and I think this Pharaoh, like the one who later enslaved us, does abuse his power just like the later one does, because he's enslaving his own people.
At Joseph's behest.
Yes.
But I think Barbara was right to say at this moment, what is Pharaoh doing? And let's see if we can look at that with fresh eyes. Mm-hmm. But you're right about what Joseph does later. Okay, I'm going to do 2 more texts because I want to get Hanukkah in here. And God willing, we'll get to Nehemiah. Oops, share my screen. Okay, so I taught this earlier this week in Beit Midrash, so I apologize to those of you who were already here, but it's such a great text, so I know you want to study it again. It's from the tractate, the Babylonian Talmud, tractate Avodah Zarah, page 8a. And it's just a wonderful story of kind of like the cosmic understanding of Hanukkah, which is really appropriate because this time of year, there's holidays from all kinds of different traditions, right? I mean, there's the, of course, Christmas, and then there's, I forget the name, Diwali. Diwali also brings light into the darkness. So all these traditions bring light into the darkness at this time of year. And, one understanding of it is like, of course, it's such a dark time of year. And especially, before we had electricity, the darkness is so intense. And we want to bring light to this time of year because it's scary, it's lonely, it's all kinds of things. Okay, so let's see what the first Adam does after Adam was kicked out of the Garden of Eden. So the sages taught. I'll just read it in English just to save time. When Adam, the first man, saw that the day was progressively diminishing, so, the days are getting shorter, but he's never been through this cycle before. So what's he thinking, right? Woe is me, perhaps because I sinned, the world is becoming dark around me and will return to the primordial state of chaos and disorder. Tohu vavohu, right? Because it's all, it's like for children, we're the center of the world, and it must have been because of me that my parents got divorced, or it must have been about me, something I did wrong because I was abused. Like the world is about me and what I do. And even as adults, we have a hard time growing out of that, right? I must have done, this happened to me. I must have done something wrong. And this is and of course, I'm not saying that we shouldn't be accountable and sort of, reckon with our own actions, but it's a real tricky sort of discernment process to figure out what's about you, what's not about you. In any case, at least at this point, it's all about him. And he says, and this is the death that was sentenced upon me from heaven, as it is written, and to dust shall you return. So he thinks he's going to die, basically. So he rose and spent 8 days in fasting and in prayer. Once he saw that the season of Tevet, the winter solstice, had arrived, and saw that the day was progressively lengthening after the solstice, he said, this must be the order of the world. It's not about me. He went and observed a festival for 8 days. Upon the next year, he observed both these 8 days on which he had fasted in the previous year and these 8 days of his celebration as his days of festivity. So in other words, he started the celebration and, during the 8 darkest days of the year to remember, I guess, that the light was coming. right? Which reminds me of Joseph's dream interpretation that the famine shouldn't wipe out, right, the abundance. The darkness shouldn't wipe out the light. And it's really interesting that prayer and fasting enables him to do this, because if he was still self sort of preoccupied, he could have said, God listened to my prayers. But instead, he kind of got out of the way through his prayer and fasting and actually saw and observed the nature of the world. So this is really a story of maturation in a way that you could say Joseph's story is also a story of maturation. Because even later when he reveals himself to the brothers and comes out to the brothers, he says, I am Joseph. And he goes, and don't worry don't worry about all these horrible things you did to me, because God sent me here to save life. Right? So it's not about you and it's not about me. I came here for a reason. So it's an interesting kind of reframing of one's experience. Okay, one more, and then I'll see if there are more comments. So I thought this was really beautiful. I found this on Sefaria. It's from the collection Iturei Torah, which is a collection of contemporary commentary on the Torah. And it's about the menorah. The commandment of candlelight in Hanukkah is necessarily and essentially the time of sunset, at the time when darkness covers the land, and a fog descends on the nation. Okay, so now, as you know, Hasidic masters do, they then sort of take it within. When the heart contracts from loneliness and despair, and it looks like there is no ray of hope or spark of light, and like brighter times have ended, just then must Hanukkah candles be lit to raise light, to banish despair, and to draw in confidence and faithfulness. And the question I have here is, it's great to say that it's a commandment to banish despair in these moments, but how do we do so, right? It's not an easy one, right? When you're in the midst of, internal, I don't know if I should say darkness or not, because I know we're trying to sort of reevaluate darkness, but internal sort of, endless sadness and emptiness, you can't just banish despair, right? So I thought that was really interesting. And again, it's sort of integrating opposites. Like, how do we bring light when there's darkness? How do we remember joy when we're in sadness? Like, how is it that the sort of forces of deprivation and even evil in life don't consume everything else? Okay, I'm going to stop my share. And we have a big 5 minutes. Okay, anyone else want to say anything who hasn't spoken especially? And then I'll go to Nehemiah. Anyone who hasn't said anything? Okay, we have a little lineup here. Nice. All repeats. Okay, so I'm going to go to all of you, but I'm going to ask you to be really quick so we get to Nehemiah. And Anna, if necessary, can we go a few minutes later? We did so last time, and it seemed like the team was agreeable. And thank you, Anna, for holding this session so seamlessly. Okay, so we'll go and she'll let us know. Okay, Asher Chaim.
How can we banish despair and darkness without abusing power, as I believe Yosef does, and without enabling oppressors, as I believe Yosef does? So how do we emerge without becoming the dark side?
So how do you grow into power without abusing power? Yeah, that's a big question. Thank you. Daniel.
So while Joseph is in Mitzrayim, Jacob and Joseph's brothers are in the land of Canaan, where there's a famine. And there's this moment when Jacob says, or has this kind of revelation. I don't know if he was reading it in the New York Times. I don't know how he discovered this, but he says to his children, I have heard, or I've seen that there is shevarim. There is shevarim. There is sustenance. There are provisions. in Mitzrayim. And Shevarim is a play on the word provisions or nurturance or sustenance, but it's also the word for brokenness, for shattering. And so in so many of our Hebrew words, there are these ways in which the place of great brokenness and darkness is also the place of sustenance and light and healing. And it kind of goes along with our understanding of the divine, that the divine is in every place. There is no place in which the divine isn't present. So it's about, in some ways, opening to facing what is there. And in the facing of those dark places, it's not about eradicating the dark. It's about being with the dark, whatever that is, the pain. And that's the story of Joseph. He has to heal his own wounded, traumatic family experience by facing his pain in the darkest place in his heart, in the darkest place, which is Mitzrayim. This is a continuation of what healing, transformation, and trauma treatment actually looks like. So
Great.
it's really important that those two go together.
Yeah, and it's no accident that he goes down to Mitzrayim, which is the narrow place, and spends a lot of time in the pit and then in the jail, which is also called the pit, right? So in those dark places. Great.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, Jay.
This may be in keeping with something I just saw of Bob's in the chat, which is I think it makes sense to also move away from the strictly intrapersonal and even familial. I was trying to figure out how early could I light the candles, and I did a little research, and it turns out you light it at sundown, ideally, when it's actually still light. And part of the rationale was, and people are still in the marketplace, so people will see. Now, some of us do put menorot in chanukiot in the window, etc. But there's a way in which lighting candles is also a communal act. And it's meant to also be a signal. So I think banishing the darkness is not just an intrapersonal or even familial act. It has to be a communal act.
Well, that's so beautiful. And I think you answered my question, is that banishing the darkness, if we look outwards instead of inwards, that might be the first tool.